My name is Maneo Mohale, and together with Iranti-org, we created a 5-part conversation series about the draft Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill. I sat down with various stakeholders, academics, and activists to discuss and unpack their views about this controversial and contentious bill. The aim of this series is to increase public awareness about the bill, but more importantly, to increase public engagement with the bill. In this interview, I speak to Sekotlaone Phamodi, an activist who's prominent and passionate and whose focus is mainly on LGBTI/queer and trans activism, particularly Black queer trans activism. In the interview, we spoke about how hate crimes in South Africa must be contextualized against the history of broader violence, of deeper violence, and historicizing hate crimes in South Africa. We also spoke about the potential limitations of the bill and how it could possibly address the kinds of violences we're seeing against marginalized people, particularly how the bill could serve or couldn't serve Black, queer, trans, and gender non-conforming South Africans.
Let's kind of jump straight into talking about the bill.
Sure.
I think a lot of the conversations has been around, well, we can't really talk about the bill if we can't talk about hate crimes and hate speech. So what's your view on hate crimes and hate speech, particularly in the context in this current South African climate, in the context that we find ourselves in?
The hate crimes bill then just seeks to do is firstly, it creates this crime, this hate crime, and it kind of classifies it as any existing crime that is, in addition to meeting its basic essentialia, the components of what makes this crime in the eyes of the state, is then also informed by prejudice, bias, or hatred. It then goes on to create the crime of hate speech, where it criminalizes any speech that that demonstrates any kind of hatred, bias, or prejudice against specified class groups. I believe there are 14 that are specified, and there are some of, it seems to me, are repetitive, and they overlap with each other, which is fine in kind of our thinking through the issues and our engagement with them on the political level, but becomes a bit of a problem when in the legal sense.
The legislative, administrative.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because the law requires a particular kind of certainty and clarity in order for it to be able to apply, which is not to say that that is right or wrong, it's just its particular character.
Yes.
And then it goes even further from the criminalization of hate speech or speech that is prejudiced, biased, or exhibits hatred against a defined class group, such as women, such as women, Black people. So then it goes further to say, well, in addition to that, we're going to, as the state, we're going to view in the sentencing process, we're going to view a conviction of hate crime or a conviction of hate speech within the context of an existing crime as an aggravating factor for the purposes of sentencing.
Yes.
So, for instance, if I had to get beaten up outside of a space where queers are known to gather, have fun, meet, and all of that by a presumably heterosexual person, then they go on to say while they beat me that I am a fucking faggot, I deserve to die, or anything of that sort of line or nature that can be interpreted as hate speech. Then that person could be convicted for not only hate speech, but also a hate crime where they've committed the crime of assault against me. that assault was informed by prejudice, bias, hatred against myself as a queer person, because I'm now being discriminated against unlawfully on the basis of my sexual identity.
We are a deeply violent society in which there are axes of violence that impact marginalized bodies the most, that there is a violence obviously by the state as well, that it is deeply ingrained within the legislative and criminal justice system. But where do we place this bill then? What do we do with this bill?
Okay. So there's this context that we're in. And us whose bodies are forced into the margins, we need a tool.
Yes.
The reality is that access to that tool and the instrumentalization of that tool with any efficacy is then ordered by where you are positioned in our society. So, questions that I have, and this will then just point to that initial question that you asked about my feelings about this bill is, so we have a very extensive body of law and jurisprudence around criminal or criminalized conduct in our society. And yet, we continue to have high levels of violence in our society. And if where those crimes have failed, where then do we expect, or how then do we expect this new set of crimes that have been created to actually have any kind of efficacy and to remedy our needs, and the problems that we are facing? So there's something more structural that needs to be happening. We already, the issue of hate speech in itself already has instruments that are available to kind of remedy these things, because the criminalization of hate speech, it appears, seeks to protect these predefined class groups from, the psychological harm and the harm to their dignity and so forth. We already have instruments like crimen injuria, which is a common law crime for the impairment of someone's dignity. We already have the PEPUDA, the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, which gives us a civil remedy for addressing instances of speech that impairs one's dignity and that also contravenes our right to exist, our right to dignity, our right to be in the world, right? In an equal way where we enjoy equal rights with all people in the society.
Yeah.
But that has failed. And that takes us back to the point that we can put as many instruments in place as we like, but we are not. But the reality is that those people who need these instruments the most are unable to access them.
Thank you so much for pointing us into the systemic.